to the degree that you want something is the degree you're afraid of not having.
Yeah.
God, I wish I started when I was younger. I go, well, yeah, but you didn't. So shut the fuck up and let's keep going.
Right.
Like, you can't.
Nobody changes until they change their energy. And when you change your energy, you change your life.
Because it's not till then that it's really real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is way worse than I thought. It's like, oh yeah, it's way, way worse than you thought.
Yeah.
But luckily, there's more to you than you think.
Erick Godsey, my brother.
Aubrey Marcus.
Here we are again. And one of the reasons that we do these things is when I'm figuring shit out. I'm learning shit. I'm going through shit. And there's nobody in the universe that I'd rather talk to about this stuff that I'm chewing on than you. And so here we are once again.
It's an absolute honor, and we'll see if we can make it not a 2-part series where it's 2.5
we gotta
hours
finish
each.
in one. We got to finish in one. So a lot of stuff going on, obviously, a ton. And I'm absolutely open to going to a variety of different places. But the through line that I want to explore are a lot of things that came up in a recent ayahuasca ceremony. Now,
You?
me? This was the absolutely unique experience for me. Now, I've done ayahuasca 20 times now. And this one was completely different because this is the first time that I didn't go down to South America to do it. I did it here in the United States. And that in and of itself was unique. And it was with some healers that were recommended to me by some dear brothers, longtime medicine men and friends. They've been trying to connect us for a while. And I was kind of like, because I had the big Soltara experience. I have another big experience back at Soltara with my very first shaman, Maestro Orlando Chuhandama.
Can't wait for that.
That's going to be epic. I can't wait to share that with you. So this was kind of like something on the in-between. And so I was like, yeah, that sounds good. But Vailana was super called to it. She was like super called to it. So she arranged it and organized it. And I was like, well, you know, my wife's into it. I guess it's happening. And then it just kind of appeared on the calendar. But I didn't really internally fully commit to it.
Yeah.
Up until like the last day, I thought maybe I would like slide out the back and be like, I'll just support, you know, because I wasn't really called. And one of the number one lessons about ayahuasca that I want to share is, you know, please only go to the medicine when you're really called to it. This was an exception to that. And it worked out great, but nonetheless, don't let the exceptions to the rule try to change the rule. The rule is wise, and then you should go to these things when you're called. And if it wasn't for a dream that I had the morning of ayahuasca,
shit. We're gonna get into dreams.
yeah, I wouldn't have done it. And you know, as we've discussed, I rarely have dreams that I attribute a high amount of significance. And you obviously think that you obviously think that all dreams have significance, but for me, there's certain ones that I'll always wake up and be like, okay. And this dream I had, it wasn't necessarily about the dream. The dream was it was really about me with a woman who was, you know, we were at like a bar and she was talking to me about the essence of judgment. And she was explaining to me the essence of judgment was a word she called shmokti. I don't know, that's not a real word. I mean, shakti is like the energy of life, and shmokti, I suppose, is like some perverted delusion of the energy of life. It's because all judgment, of course, is delusion because it's predicated on the myth of separation, this idea that we are not all the same emanation of life. Call it God, call it love, you know, call it whatever you want. But to judge, you have to have separate, this is better than that. Like there is no, if in the pure white light, part of the pure white light isn't better than the other part of the pure white light, or like part of homogenized vanilla ice cream isn't better than the other part of vanilla ice cream, unless maybe there's a cookie crumble in one part that you prefer better, right? But nonetheless, so, and we'll get into that, but it was so interesting, this dream. And I just woke up with this clear thing like, oh man, I'm doing ayahuasca today. And so, you know, I did it. And the other part of that is that I've been in so many different gnarly situations in different plant medicines. I think for people who really want to go back to the catalog, I even announced I'm done with psychedelics forever on a podcast after a particularly gnarly journey. So gnarly that I had to sleep on the floor for like 6 days following it, because even the bed felt too ungrounded. It was such a intense journey, and we don't need to rehash that story. But that was
how long ago?
6 years ago, probably. And then also, obviously, my dance with the world crusher, who was negotiating for my father's soul, and all of these massively intense journeys. And I've told all these stories, and I've always navigated my way through. So I had this sense that, all right, whatever comes, I have confidence that I'll be able to navigate through it. I've pushed myself into difficult spots and always worked my way through. So there wasn't necessarily a fear of it. And I'd been following a loose dieta, just in case. My dieta practices are not typically the tightest. But the shamans that we were working with were trained in the Brazilian tradition, and they had some Peruvian training too. But it was a much different style. Their dieta rules were different. Their practices were different. The whole thing was going to be different anyway. So it wasn't like going to a very strict Shipibo tradition or even mestizo tradition, which can be equally as strict.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Brazilian tradition.
Yeah, man, and neither was I. So I've only worked with the Peruvian tradition, either Shipibo, which is probably the oldest and most consistent lineage, which we worked with at Soltara. Mm-hmm. And then the mestizo tradition, which is Maestro Orlando Chuandama, which is different and has some similarities, but different. And I'm excited to share that with you.
Yeah.
And that was who I worked with from my very first discussion of ayahuasca on JRE 127 or whatever that was. That was working with Maestro Orlando, so it'll be kind of full circle with him. But so I wasn't necessarily scared of what was going to come, but it's always intense. Like ayahuasca is nothing that is simple by any stretch of the imagination. It's always work. They call it trabajo, work. And for the last time we did this and discussed all the things that came up, obviously there was ample amounts of work and growth and lessons in that. So I went in with just kind of a quiet confidence in myself, met the shamans for the first time, and had just this amazing affinity. Like the moment I met him, it was like, oh, you again.
Right.
Like here we are again, like exactly like I've known him forever in this life and many others. And here we are. And so that really set the stage and put it at ease.
Was it just one shaman?
Two. Male and a female. And and ayahuasca was from Hawaii. Also, something I've never experienced before. So apparently Terrence McKenna transplanted a bunch of ayahuasca vines into Hawaii, and then they sourced the chacruna leaf from all of the different islands. So the chacruna was also maybe native or maybe also planted.
Interesting.
And so it was really like carrying this spirit of Hawaii. And
Vi loved that.
Vi loved that. My wife being Hawaiian, she loved that. So that's one of the reasons why she was so called to it. But anyways, just a very small group, just 4 of us, and very small. And we kind of get right to it. We have our thing. It gets dark. We get right to it. We have our first cup. And what was really unique from the start is the musicality was different. The Icaros, first of all, are in Portuguese, which was beautiful, man. Like beautiful to hear Portuguese Icaros rather than the Quechua Spanish Icaros that you're used to. Similar in some ways, but very different in other ways. So the songs were different, but also the musicality was completely opened up because it would go from Icaros with shakers and songs and whistles and the thing that you were used to harmonica, to drums, to gongs, to bowls, to all kinds of different instrumentation that was available. And that was a radically unique experience as well. And I remember feeling the first thing that kind of came to me was, wow, this is beautiful. Like this is beautiful music. And the drums was also very interesting because there's something about drums. In a typical ayahuasca experience, it's silent and then the Icaros start just and you're like, oh shit, here it comes.
Yeah.
But when the drums were coming early, it like kind of like awoke this warrior spirit, like, here we go. You know, it's like, and you're like, oh fuck, all right, like I'm ready to show up, like I'm here for this. And so it kind of clicked the mindset, like I'm here for the work, like let's go. And it kicked on strong, and the music kept going, and there's an encouragement that if you felt it, to get up and dance as well, which was also completely unique.
So different than the style that I've done.
Completely different.
Whoa.
And I remember one of the first so the ayahuasca starts kicking in it. And for those of you who haven't taken it, it comes in these like waves of energy, and the waves of energy flow through your body and almost crest right in your head, in your third eye. And then the visions like peel out into all of these different fractals and shapes and swirling, medicine is what they really call it when the visions come. It's just the medicine working its way through and working its way through your body. But the first, real moment where I was like, wow, this is not only musically different, was when they were playing one of the drumming songs and singing along with the drumming song, and it was intense. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to get up and dance. Like, fuck it. Ecstatic dance is a deep part of my practice. Wow. And I remember dancing, and the ayahuasca is strong at this point, like strong. And I was dancing, but it was literally like the ayahuasca was dancing me.
Right.
And I started laughing because I was like, oh, like this is ecstatic dance. Like it was where I wasn't doing anything. Like ayahuasca was just shaking me and moving me in ways that I was just a passenger.
Yeah.
I was just a passenger to this cosmic dance that was flowing through me. And it was potent. And then of course, like, different elements of the purge would come, but the songs were it was just woven in with just such mastery with that whole experience that it really impossibly beautiful to describe ultimately. Yeah. And there was something about being able to move like that also helped the energy move. So I didn't actually end up purging liquid out of my like vomit, because I was able to kind of move the energy. And you've talked about this as well. Yeah. Like your ability to purge through breathing or purge through, there's so many ways to purge, but the dance itself was a type of purge.
100%.
It was a way to like kick off the excess energy that was building, it can become almost unbearable. Yeah. And so you have to release it somehow because the intensity. And I'll talk about this a lot more for my second journey, because this was a big part about how to deal with the growing and almost unbearable ecstatic energy that ayahuasca can bring. And sometimes deeply, challenging psychological stuff. But also for me, one of the biggest challenges is the physical challenges, just like the energy going, and whether it's the nausea or just trying to hold that much. It's like you're plugged into the source outlet, and it's just a million volts of source energy just flowing through your body and fixing things and healing, but reorienting things at this massive amplitude. So that was going, and I would just catch myself just in absolute marvel of the music and the experience. And it's not that this is better, and I'm saying that this way is better, but it was beautiful to experience it in a different way. Yeah. And ended up drinking 2 more cups that night. Wow. And really the interesting, there's a lot of interesting parts that happen, but the real psychologically interesting parts came in when I started thinking about my relationship with my father. And this is something that's not necessarily new, because in the darkness, I talked about how when I connected to Whitney, she was asking me, am I doing it right? Right. It's always so tough for me to think about that, but because I took on this kind of judgmental quality that I'd learned and the world teaches you. And without trying to judge her in any way, there was some part of me that thought that she could be doing better at these certain things and would love her more when I felt like she was doing better for the world, for herself, for me. and then retract a little bit, not intentionally. I'm not like trying to do this, but it's just inherent. And I could see how that pattern affects somebody, you know, and that was so difficult to realize. But
shmokti,
judgment. Yeah, exactly. But in this one, I saw myself as the boy, and I was saying it to my dad. And I realized that so much of my life, I was subconsciously asking, did I do it right, Dad? Am I doing it right, Dad? Did I do good, Dad? And of course, Dad eventually fades away in the real form of like, I'm not, you know, I don't have a relationship with my father now anymore because of his mental health conditions and things. But Dad is a universal thing that's now become internalized into me. So even though it's not my dad that I'm actually asking that to, literally, it's the internalized version of Dad that I'm always asking, am I doing it right? You know, am I doing it right, Dad? And so much of my own mental construct is about like asking myself and judging myself whether I'm doing it right.
Yeah, there's so much there. I forgot who put this question forward, but that it really stuck with me. And it's that whichever parent you actually had the harder relationship with is the parent that you unconsciously needed the most validation from. And that parent tends to be the one that we internalize as the inner like scorekeeper. And for the next 30 or 40 years, the choices you make in relationship, the choices that you make in career, the choices you make in what you do with your body and like your friendships, it's to try to win over that judge. And like an interesting thing for me is that there's, am I doing it right? And then there's the rebel against the father, which is the like, fuck you, I'm doing it my way, you know, and so whatever way you think is right, I'm purposefully doing the opposite, and both have their own chains. For me, because my dad, like he was never an influential force, and that was my wound. And so it was always like, the inner father was like, I don't have anything to say to you, you know, like you're stupid, basically was my response to it. And that I think our relationship to the archetypical father is actually how we relate to government, and it's actually how we relate to nation. It's how we relate to culture, you know, that on some level that tends to hold the archetypical father energy. And did anything come up for you specifically about the call that you got from the last time you did ayahuasca about going and connecting with your father?
Yeah. I mean, so in the last time there was a deep message about, you know, following through with rescuing the lost father archetype. And this was a confirmation that is incredibly important for me to do. But really this was more about a gateway into my own judgment and how pervasive it is and how much of a guide. And interestingly, you said that there's that rebel aspect, but in some ways we also believe that the rebel is the right way. And maybe we saw that here. Maybe it's Bruce Willis movies, you know, where it was like, that becomes the way that we model our behavior. Oh, right. The right behavior, doing it right, is not following what the authority says, because authority's full of shit. Right. And authority's wrong. So the doing it the right way is the rebel. So that's not even an escape.
No, because you're like, if you were free, you would ask your heart, what do I want to do today?
Right.
If you're chained, it's either what does Dad want me to do, or what does Dad want? I'm doing the opposite. And the rebel, in some sense, is just as chained to the father as the boy who's asking, did I do it right?
Right. And it's just a different value structure that you're chained to, like what to you is the most virtuous act, which then determines your own worthiness of love. You can imagine the rebel in that situation going along with the consensus, following and whatever that might be, you know, like falling in line, wearing your mask, doing whatever the thing is in this, and then saying like, man, you pussy. Right. Like, I can't believe you just followed along and you didn't chart your own way and make a stand, you know? And so it just depends on which value structure you're in. Or if the value structures follow the rules and then you broke the rules, you might say, I can't believe I broke the rules. How disrespectful of me to do this, but it's
Right.
still, as you said, like you're still not free.
Both are chained.
And the game is to get free. And the freedom comes from not having love given or withdrawn dependent upon the actions you take. Find the place of that unconditional love, that love that says, I love you if you do this, and I love you if you do that. So what do you want to do?
Right.
You know, and then you're free, because if there's more love that you give yourself for one outcome than another, you're going to steer towards that outcome. So if you're locked in the world of conditionality, you're chained. You're not free. You know,
A friend shared a story with me a couple of days ago where she's been on a journey for a couple of years of really starting to become aware of of the most terrifying thing that people fear that will come up as a repressed memory if they do psychedelics, and that was her truth. And that she has been doing work for a long time trying to get to a place where she can genuinely love and have compassion for that part. And she hasn't been able to until she fell in love with someone where that other person finally let forward on accident their most shameful thing that she was able to hold love for him. And then she had this like kundalini moment in the car on the way home after a really tough conversation where she essentially had complete love for that shameful part of him. And that through doing it for him, she could feel that she was now able to, for the first time, like feel that she could hold that part of her without judgment. And that seems to be what the opportunity of relationships offer, because we don't get to choose who we love. It seems to be that there's a deeper intelligence of something unfolding, and that I can feel the pain in your body when you connect to that vision of Whitney, because there was an invitation to do a certain type of loving that wasn't able to quite land, you know, and there is a way where it is perfect. And you know, I get to witness you, and I have seen how you have held space for parts of Vi that she didn't think was lovable, and how she has bloomed through that. And it's such a tough thing in human nature to like be like, damn, if only I was what I am now 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
It's brutal. That's I was going to talk about that a little bit later, because that was another big part of later in night too, you know, just recognizing you get to these truths and you get to this experience. Fortunately, I had that experience in the darkness and was able to do a much better job loving Whitney exactly as she was for a while. And I think if I didn't have that, you know, whatever, 8 months or 6 months of, I don't know how long we were still dancing together after that experience, but a good chunk of time where, you know, I was able to love her a lot better than, you know, actually I think it was less, maybe 3 months, but at least there was like a little bit of time where I was able to do it for a little bit. But it is really hard to know that, you know, you can't go back.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing I can imagine that's hard for parents who've gone through an awakening process, seeing how they could have loved their kids differently, seeing how you could have loved your ex-partners differently. And it's one of the just kind of incredibly challenging things about the nature of time, that as you evolve, what happened in the past can't be undone. You can express it and there can be healing in the present, but you just have to go from where you are now forward and not be saddled by looking back into the past, because that'll deny you what you have in the present. And also, if your message is about not being in judgment of, you know, towards the ones you love, well, certainly don't be in judgment of yourself now for not being in judgment then. And that's like ultimately the way out of judgment is you cannot judge your judgment, right? Like the moment you're judging your judgment, you're in this repeating cycle, this infinity loop where you're never going to get out of it.
Yeah.
Is you're just going to have shame about your judgment, about your judgment. And it's like looking in one of those mirrors where it just gets smaller and smaller, like the double mirrors where it gets smaller and smaller off into infinity, as it's just reflecting back and forth and back and forth. But the only way to break the pattern is to love even your judgment and love yourself as the one who judged then, and love you. You have to apply that universally, and especially if you're on this and recognizing that judgment is one of the deepest shadows in the delusion of separation.
Yeah.
Like you have to love your way out of it and love your judgment out of it.
And I think where people get stuck is because English is trying to capture so many different things with the word love, that the Greeks had like 4, I think they had 6 different types of love. And I can feel that the type of love that you're meaning, because I think most people, when they hear love, they think of the like desirous attraction that comes with like romantic love. Mm-hmm. But that the type of love that you're talking to it's the same. It's the type of love that witnesses without any other shit. Like it's the way God loves existence, where it's witnessing. Mm-hmm. And to witness in peace has no judgment, it has no assessment, it has no preference. It allows it to be. Loving it doesn't mean that you allow someone to steal from you. But loving means that you do not try to move away the fact that you're angry. Yeah. Or you try to move away the fact that you're jealous or that you're envious. You allow it. Because it really feels like the big thing that keeps us separated is that we don't allow these little squishy things to feel their truth when it arises. And the judgment is almost a way to be like, no, not going to feel that. Not going to feel that. Not going to feel you. Get the fuck away from here. Mm. And that, the Ram Dass thing of end this. Like, I get triggered by it because when I'm not wanting to feel what wants to be felt, I use the end this as meaning I allow terrible things to happen. But it seems like the wisdom of the end this is, can you allow this guest to come into Rumi's house for tea?
Yeah.
Like, can you allow it in and allow it to be?
Yeah, we're inherently a paradoxical being. And this is also one of the challenges, is that we are a physical being, and our body has pain signals and pleasure signals. And all right, in certain sexual practices, you can cross the wires and get freaky with them and swirl them all up. And
# bliss fuck.
Yeah, pain can become pleasure, pleasure can become pain, whatever. But ultimately there is a clear separation, and it is, you're going to kid yourself if you think that, rubbing velvet versus rubbing, broken glass is going to feel the same way. It's just not on your skin. Certain things are not going to taste the same way, certain things. So judgment is built in to our organism.
Yes.
And to try and bypass that and pretend that you have no judgment on that level, you're full of shit. This is the epitome of spiritual bypass.
Yes.
And on the emotional level, you're going to have preferences. Certain things feel a lot better than other things. Certain thoughts are more pleasant. The neurochemical cocktails associated with these create a different outcome. So judgment is built in to who we are. It is a part of it. However, we're also all the way through our soul connected through on this like thin red line, this strand, all the way back to source. And at source itself, there's pure non-judgment,
right?
Because all is one. As I said, the one side of the vanilla does not judge the other side of the vanilla. It's all vanilla. The pure white light doesn't judge the pure white light. The pure dark void doesn't judge the pure dark void. It's the same void. It's the same light. It's the same ice cream. Like, it doesn't even make any sense, and all of that is true. So you get in these paradoxical things. All right, what's your point of identification? Are you identifying as God?
Right.
Well, sure, don't judge. But if you're identifying as human, you're going to have some judgment. But with that, you can accept the inherent, always constant paradox and move into the acceptance to say, let me bring the wisdom of my divine nature. And while I honor and acknowledge my preference for this thing, I also am not going to judge it and say it is not worthy of love, because I remember the truth of this. And so it's kind of finding a synthesis and a harmony between our physical being and our divine being, which is why the words also fail, because, well, what's the point of identification? Who's the speaker? Like, Are you speaking as your God self? Are you speaking as your soul self? Because your soul might have a preference to learn something over not learn something.
Right.
You know, like if we listen to what Paul Selig said, the soul is here to learn. Okay, well then if you're not learning, maybe it doesn't want to do that as much as it likes learning.
Right.
So there may even be preference at that dimensional reality. And then in the physical, there's obviously preference. So where's your point of identification? And then how do you synthesize all of that and love the fact that, yeah, your body prefers pleasure, your mind prefers this, your soul prefers this, but God doesn't prefer anything. God says, fucking go for it. Whatever you want, it's all good. I love you all the same.
There's a lot that comes up there. One of the things is that when people talk about something being a paradox, the thing that always comes to my mind that you actually intuitively went directly to is you actually move past the paradox if you can relax into there are different levels of identification. Like there are different spheres of frequency that you can tune to. And if you can feel into that, like if you're somehow a two-dimensional being and you look at a table, it can both simultaneously be up and down and across. And that's a paradox at the second dimensional perspective. You move to the third dimensional perspective, it's not a paradox.
Yeah.
It instantly makes sense. And so it feels like whenever we get to a place where it starts to feel like a paradox, you know, the Einstein quote is like, what is the different perspective that might be one level above this that you can actually look at the thing that feels like it's a paradox and, oh, it's a table. It's not up and down and aside and across at the same time. No, it's a fucking table. And the other thing is that the human nervous system is the most complex technology that we've ever apprehended in the known universe. So we don't have a piece of technology outside of it that we can currently use as the proper metaphor. Like we don't know what the fuck this shit is.
Yeah.
And so it's like the way that the human mind even perceives beyond what it knows is through metaphor. And if we don't have an image or a metaphor for it, we fucking like just go blah, you know? And we haven't yet created the technology that allows for us to give a metaphor too. Like there is something about, okay, I'm in a body, and if there's a lion right here, all the other dimensionalities above me are fucking gone. I am in my goddamn body. But like, if I can sit on a cushion and I can kind of fuck with my breathing and the air conditioning is wafting and like, I feel like I'm completely safe in this dimension, I might start to like, wow, there was a past life where I fucking was doing the hula hoop on the top of a volcano and there were things going off around me and there's aliens and shit. And like, there's a huge amount of shit that we can't even yet know because we don't even have the metaphors to create it. And there was another thing that was actually the most exciting thing that I was going to talk about that I'm losing the thread of, but it feels like once you start talking again, I'll remember.
Yeah. I mean, I think another important thing is that just because we can understand the divine perspective, all is of God or nothing is, as Paul Selig says, like this is all life and love expressing itself. Just because we know that doesn't mean that that perspective is better. Because the moment we go, that perspective is better, we've actually lost the perspective in and of itself. We're applying judgment to say, this is better, the divine is better.
Yeah.
Whereas the divine's going, better? Excuse me? Pardon? You know, like, did you say better? Because then you're not talking about me.
Right.
And this is another big factor is like we project this judgment onto everything. All of of course, we projected it onto the Jehovah-like deities, you know, that we've created and these ideas. So, I mean, so rife with judgment. And the crazy thing, I remember in my philosophy of religion class, we explored this deeply when I was in college, because that was kind of my concentration of philosophy. But you would have to imagine that the divine being that was worthy of worship, the one that you would want to worship, would at the very least be as good as the best human, right? So, or the best government, let's say. If we had a government that punished someone eternally, forever, with hellfire, and to literally burn them over and over and over again, torturing them, which is the description of hell, would we worship that human? Or would we be like, that's a fucking demon, bro?
Right.
That is a tyrant.
Right.
You know, and of course we would say tyrant, but nonetheless, we've ascribed that for so many thousands of years.
Yeah.
Fortunately, that's kind of waning, this hellfire and brimstone interpretation. But we have it in subtle ways. God loves this and not this. God loves this and not this. So it starts all the way at the top of God, but it goes all the way to our demigods. We do it even with ayahuasca.
100%.
You know, like, oh, ayahuasca is going to punish you if you broke your dieta. Punish you? Would I, as your friend, punish you for not eating the right food before we went to a breath work? Would I punish you for that? No. And so are you saying that ayahuasca is not as good as a normal person?
Right.
Of course not. It's the most benevolent healer we know. It's not going to punish you. There may be, you know, chemical reactions. There may be your own doubt and judgment that's played out. It may exacerbate a variety of these things. You may have to deal with the consequences of being less clean physically and having a more difficult purge, but don't project judgment. And then they say, oh, ayahuasca is jealous of cannabis. Jealous? If you're going to say that there's somebody on the physical plane that can transcend jealousy and be in an open relationship, yeah, it's hard, but there's people polyamorous who've transcended jealousy. Right. And you're saying that ayahuasca is not even as evolved as them?
Right.
Bullshit. I'm not jealous of cannabis. It just doesn't work well.
Right. We anthropomorphize aspects of nature with our perspective of emotionality. And I think the metaphor that comes up for me is that if I know that I'm going to play you in basketball tomorrow, you're not going to quote unquote punish me if I eat like shit the next day, but you're not going to slow down and you're going to try to win. And it will feel like a punishment if I have the right wounding and I don't do the right type of work. And then also like if I smoked before and I just can't think clearly, and then I might anthropomorphize to other people. When you play Aubrey tomorrow in basketball, if you eat this hamburger and you smoke this weed, he's going to be jealous and he's going to punish you. And like ayahuasca on that level is it's like, we're going to fucking go for it.
Yep.
And you're responsible for what you bring and how ready you are. And, you know, people who haven't been trained in the scientific method and have only been trained in, you know, the wisdom of relating to nature like it's an aspect of the self or the psyche, that's the way that they're going to bring back their data of like, whoa, ayahuasca will be mean to you if you don't do all these things. And, you know, they didn't understand about the chemical interactions in the same way that we do. And the thing that came back to me before, when you start to get into the different levels or dimensionalities of consciousness, like there's a part of me that's like, fuck, how do I choose to do anything? You know, like I can feel that the map is beyond what I will ever be able to make sense of. And the thing that I come back to constantly is that regardless of the infinite complexity of what this thing is, we all seem to have this like smooth, still inner whisper. And, you know, I've turned it into a god in our group and I call it the Daimon, and you can call it whatever the fuck you want. But everyone knows what that thing is. And everyone knows when they transgress it. And everyone knows when they're in alignment with it. And like, we all get to keep doing work by kind of making it more complex than it needs to be. And there's all sorts of ways to like help people remember how to get back to that thing. But it seems to be each of us are born with this like inner Icaros that's like whistling. And it wants to move through us in the way that the ayahuasca was moving you. And we go through our own traumas and our own conditioning and our own shame and guilt and whatever. And we ignore the song, but the song's always playing and the song wants you to do something specific. And one of the things that will keep you from letting the song move through you is your judgments, you know?
That's what gets us lost. That's what gets us lost in a dense fog, a choking, dark fog where we can't see our reflection clearly in the mirror. We lose sight of who we are. We lose sight of what we're doing because the judgment carries with it the desire to punish the self. You know, so if we bring judgment to something else, we're going to create that reality. If we bring our judgment, oh, I deserve this thing. You know, you cheat on your spouse, right? And you know that it's wrong and you know that it's bad. you're going to manifest something bad happening to you or getting caught or some way to find to get the retribution, to get you what you feel like you deserve.
Right.
Unless you've somehow carefully, sociopathically rationalized it in a way where it's like, well, because of this and this is fair. And we do that shit too, and to try and escape the judgment. But nonetheless, it's going to keep us from actually going smoothly through anything. And for me, you have the idea of the Daimon, and I think that's a beautiful idea, and I don't disagree. But I think it can almost be simpler. I think, like, really deeply asking, like, what do I really want? What do I really want? And like allowing the sacred want, not I have to, not I need to, but like, what do I really want? I just had that podcast with Don Miguel Ruiz, and he talks about his great grandfather, Don Ezekiel, and he's just such a playful rascal. And, and I think about, Ram Dass's guru, Maharaji, and he's just throwing fruit and just, playing with people. He's just playing and being a rascal. But every once in a while, when he needs to dial it in, or he wants to dial it in, I should say, when he wants to dial it in and give people the full God experience, even though he's emanating that, he does that.
Yeah.
And then people feel that. But most of the time, he's just being a rascal. Same with Don Ezekiel, rich with magic and the ability to use his intent to bend the universe. But most of the time, he's going to play practical jokes, have drinks, dance, and laugh. And it's like following, I think that to me is the place of freedom, is we're naturally going to want to help people because we do know deeply that you or me living a different life. So it's not going to lead to some selfish hedonism unless we're also in delusion. And then it's, what does an aspect of me want? But if the totality of you is saying, what do I really want? Well, that includes the state of inner being. That includes our connection to the earth, to each other, to ourself.
Yeah.
And also the connection to infinity, which says, yeah, all right, I want to do this, but you know what? There's going to be another earth. At some point, in some place, there'll be another one. And there'll be another one.
Infinity fucks me up, man.
Yeah. And there'll be another one, and there'll be another one, and there'll be another one. So let's do all this. Great. But let's play while we do it. Let's dance. Let's dance while we do it. Let's enjoy. Let's laugh. Let's love. Let's not take everything. Is this life or death? This is so serious. Do the work. The world needs you. All that. Yeah, maybe all true. But like, I play my best basketball when I'm loose, when I'm talking shit, when I'm laughing, like when I'm like trying to throw Sterling into the side of a fence, because we're getting fucking heated. I'm not playing my best hoop.
Yeah.
Like I'm playing my best hoop when I feel like Jordan giving a wink. Like, that's right, bitch.
Yeah.
Like, and it's fun. And same with pickleball. I'll see that all the time. It's a sport I'm playing the most now. Someone hits a bad shot and they're like, come on, man. And they get all down on themselves. I'm like, you're fucked, bro. Like, you are fucked.
There's something, I love fucking playing sports that like you can get to that place where people are really trying, because just like you shared, you get to see what their inner dad's like.
Yeah.
And there was a part of me that was a Machiavellian fucking trickster when I was in college, because I was learning all the things I was learning in my classes, and I'd be smoking weed, and I would go to the basketball court and I would just like fuck with people. But like a part of fucking with them was being able to see, like, you can almost, if you allow yourself to get kind of mythic, you can almost see the father over them and how that father talked to them by how they're talking to themselves when they have an error.
Yeah.
And one of the threads that like was coming up when you were sharing about, did you say Don Ezekiel?
Don Ezekiel, yeah.
Is like one of the things that's really hard to feel into is that it seems to be that there's like a human tapestry that is the song that Gaia is singing, and it's a symphony, and there's a whole bunch of different threads that need to be for the whole thing to create one cohesive song or one cohesive image. And that there are parts of the symphony where it's a fucking dark note, and there's a part of the symphony that's the top of the crescendo of the bliss. And that like my genuine call about how to be is going to be different than yours, and is going to be different than the other people in this room. And it's like there is a part of me that feels bad at witnessing your playfulness and feeling into my sincere seriousness. And of course I have a part of me that can joke, but that I can feel that like the instrument that I want to be loves to have a furrowed brow, and that it's complemented by your trickster energy. Right. And then I also think vice versa. It's like there's a part of me that wants to fucking bring the brow down, and that like feeling into the intelligence of your heart that draws you to the just right lovers also draws you to the just right friends. And it's not because they're the same.
Yeah.
It's because they hold a different note in the symphony that is the thing that is unfolding.
Yeah.
And that's at least what I tell myself when I start to feel that I'm not playful enough.
Well, fuck, man. I mean, that's when I feel the most alive, is when I'm playing. Like, I'm the most alive. I'm literally magic at that point. When I'm like alive like that, like I feel magical. I feel like a magical being. It's feeling like things are just effortless and happening, and I'm not second guessing anything, and I'm laughing, and it's like there's a magnetism to it, you know, and the magnetism is just like drawing in everything in perfect accord. And granted, there is a time and place for the Goggins-like work ethic. Put your head down, stay hard, motherfucker, keep hammering, motherfucker, let's go. I get it. And there's an important time and a place for that. But that's, to me, not where the magic happens. The magic happens when I'm still doing the same thing, but I'm playing, you know, and like, it's the best I perform physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, is when there's this kind of levity to it. And I'm like, I'm in on the joke, and I'm laughing, you know, with God. It's like Paul Selig's guides. You know, I asked Paul Selig's guides, I say, do you ever laugh? And they said, if we wanted, we would be laughing all the time. And I was like,
right.
Like that's it. Right. It's just like, so really, like, I think we're always trying to wonder, like, what does source want, or what does the universe want? Yeah, they want us to do and share our gifts and all that, but also they're constantly saying, like, go play.
Right.
Go play. Like, just have fun. Like, enjoy this thing. You know, like really enjoy it. But therein lies another terrifying aspect, which is we have to let it all go. And this is something I've covered a lot. I recently wrote a newsletter about it. Big lesson from the darkness.
It was good.
But it's oftentimes people say, you know, we do these things to numb the pain. Okay, pain is hard, but I think the biggest thing that we numb is we numb the joy. We numb the bliss. We numb ourselves to love, because we've learned in the temporal way, when relationships end or people die, that sometimes that avenue, that conduit of love will go away. But time is undefeated, and time will take everything in this physical reality that you love. It'll take it away. And so if we don't got much to lose, fuck this life, FML, fuck my life, whatever, I don't care. It's not so scary. That monster of time actually might even be doing us a favor. You know, time's going to come. It's going to end this. This too shall pass. We say about our own life, this too shall pass. No worries. But we're in this blazing inferno of laughter and love and sensuality. And then we look at time, and then we see the fucking fangs. And then we see, like, oh God, you're going to eat me? You mean you're going to eat this youthful body that likes to play all these games and make love and dance, and you're going to eat it? Fuck. Like, I have to reckon with that. And we're the only being in the whole universe. Well, I don't know, probably other beings in the universe, but the only being on earth that has to reckon with that fact.
Has to walk towards the fangs. Slowly.
Has to walk slowly towards the fangs. And so how are you going to deal with that? Are you going to pretend that you got nothing to eat? You know, like, whatever, I got nothing to eat. Or are you going to go as big and as bright and as colorful as you are, as this giant blueberry of ecstasy, and say, fucking go for it, time.
What a great image.
You know, like, how are you going to play it? Are you going to dry yourself out so you're not scared, you know? And there's a real beauty to the fact that no matter what humans do, it's amazing, immense courage to be human. Like immense to be in this physical reality, subject to time as the ultimate predator, and knowing that it will get us. Like there's a beauty to the courage that it takes to be human, and also a deep compassion for the people who are playing the other side, just saying like, no, just keep it, temper it all down more. Where's more pills? Where's more booze? Where's more, social isolation? Where's more whatever? Let me just lock it all down. I get it. I understand. Like, this is terrifying. And if you're acting that way, I'm not going to judge you, because I have respect for what you're up against. I really, really do. And of course, all the trauma patterns, all the other things. But fundamentally, even if none of that's there, I have respect that you're staring at the face of the most terrifying monster you could possibly imagine, a monster that you cannot defeat.
And it's eternity.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, so no matter what choice anybody makes, like mad courage, but to those, like to the warrior poets, the ones who just, I think that's why I love Cyrano so much. And just like the ones who just live on the edge of the sword and just say, play with all of the energy and let themselves feel everything from the lows to the highs, and just engage in life and really dive in. Like that is, the ultimate expression of courage. And, I, as I said in my newsletter, like I deeply bow and salute you, and I'm fucking with you to the end, because that's the way. And I'm aspiring to be even more like that.
Right.
Because I can't underestimate how much of my own challenges that I experience, my own little melancholic episodes, my own clinging to stressful things and worrying about shit, how much of that is me just trying to shed a little joy, because it's too scary when I get that big and I have more to lose that time is going to eat. So I'm like trying to just dispatch of a little bit of the joy of something, the amount that I love someone, or the amount, I think a good amount, but I know now, like, all right, like I want to feed time. I want to feed time like time has never been fed. I want to fill its fucking belly. when it eats me, I want it to be like, damn, that Aubrey Marcus was goddamn delicious.
Yeah.
That I think is, it's just big rallying cry that came through. And again, I'm jumping around a little bit. That really landed for me after night 2 of ceremonies. And the next day, the integration day, we were just watching, different cartoons, and, Disney movies are fucking great now.
Yeah.
By the way.
Especially once you kind of crack the mythic code, like they open up. There's a couple of things I wanted to touch on the thing that you shared. The first thing that came to mind is that what you were articulating about, it's not so much the numbing of the pain, but it's the numbing of the joy. That feels like, so there's this study that shows that money has no correlation to happiness once you reach about $80,000. But before that, it has almost a direct correlation to happiness. And that what you're sharing is almost like the spiritual version of the person who's crossed that $80,000 threshold, that you have done the hard things and also have had the luck and had the opportunities and had the successes where you are confronting the boss after most people think there are no more bosses. And you're actually being a beacon for most of the people who are listening, who like, there's a second mountain, dog. But there's so many people I know who, because of either the roll of the dice or that they chose to have this type of life, they are truly running away from the pain, that they don't even, like, if they listened to what you said, they would be like, at best, I don't fucking get it. At worst, you're completely fucking delusional. And it's because, and I have some people very close to me that I can see that they're in the sub $80,000 a year of like just ease in their own body, and that they want to fucking die. They want to die because they don't know how to do anything to make the pain stop. And that I just felt called to like voice that first half of the spectrum, but that I am now at the very beginning of this new boss where it's like, oh shit, I'm actually afraid of feeling more fully because I'm starting to feel that I can pay the lip service to it all day. But the truth is I am afraid to die. And I remember when I was like 20 and 21 and I first started doing like DMT and I was like telling people, I'm not afraid to die. Like I fucking get it, blah, blah, blah. And it was because I hadn't really tasted like the bliss blueberry of life yet. And, you know, a huge part of the medicine of being around y'all is that y'all have showed me, yeah, Eric, you can be serious and you can, you know, do your fucking thing where you work 12 hours a day and you're in the office every weekend. And there's this, and this is okay. And like, I know y'all saw me at the beginning and just how afraid I was of feeling any of the blueberry bliss. And like, now that I'm beginning to feel it, I almost feel like I'm at a point in my life where I feel almost paralyzed by like the buffet of beautiful things that I know that I could manifest in my life if I chose it. And one of the things I've been articulating to my friends recently is like, I'm now having to deal with the burden of abundance. Like, neither of my parents had abundance, and I never experienced it really as a child. And I almost don't know what to do. Like, there's this part that's like defaulting to like just kind of not really showing up to my life because, you know, I'm more afraid to die now than ever because of the amount of like joy and bliss and success that I'm experiencing. And yeah, I just wanted to put forth, like, I wanted to give a voice to the people.
And I agree with you, but I would also counter that we cannot measure the hidden amount of fear of joy. Like this is something that Dr. Ross Ellenhorn talks about, the fear of hope, you know, because we're afraid to hope because actually the disappointment of getting that hope dashed is more painful to our psyche than, you know, to actually hope and actually have it.
Yeah.
You know, so we're afraid to hope because we're afraid of the disappointment of that. So we'd rather just not have hope. It's more painful to have hope and lose it than to not have hope at all. Right. And I think that's true. That resonates. And I think this is for a lot of people. You know, I have a dear friend who has a terribly bad case of tinnitus, and he's not doing the things that are possible to cure it. And these are, of course, you know, fringier things like, you know, different stem cell treatments in your ear, or maybe even different medicine journeys.
Well, you mean things not supported by standard pharmaceutical models that have funded the studies and also paid 80% of the wages of the FDA who approve the drugs? Oh.
Correct. But it's not even so much that he is locked in this Western allopathic medical model. He is probably a little bit conditioned by that, but he's also afraid to hope that he could get better. Because if he hopes that he could get better, then all of the work that he's done to accept his condition now, it comes in jeopardy, because the moment he starts hoping, he could get smashed again with the disappointment, which has come time and again when he's hoped that it would become better and it hasn't. So he'd almost prefer to stay with this incredibly painful condition than to hope that he could potentially cure it and take the chance to do it because he doesn't want that disappointment. And
I see what you're saying.
I was helping him work with that. And I think sometime, and of course, yes, there's sometimes where the pain is just the pain, and you know, the apple is just the apple. I forget which way Freud said it, but sometimes
sometimes the cigar is just a cigar.
Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. Sometimes the pain is just the pain. But sometimes we're afraid to hope, and sometimes we're afraid to be joyous because we're afraid of death. Sometimes we're afraid to hope because of disappointment, and sometimes we're afraid to be in love and joy. We're afraid to love because we might get our heart broken, and we're afraid to be in joy because we know time is going to eat us. And to what extent that is playing, it's hard to say. But I think that it's there always. I think that even in the most dire cases, there is that fear of hope because of disappointment, the fear of love because of heartbreak, and the fear of joy because of the fangs of time. And that's all I would venture to say. And I think the proportion is different for everybody, and it's a mixed.
Yeah.
And maybe some people it's sub 1% in all of that, and the cigar is just a cigar, but I think it's there, man.
Yeah, and I can feel into the specific example that came up in me of the person I know that made me share that, and I can feel that there is a long history of broken hope that has led to the hopelessness that I think underneath it all, it's like there's something about if you've been sick or hurt for a long time, if you even begin to feel into that it could be better, there's almost like a guilt that you feel about yourself for how long it took you to get to the point to be, and that like just one of the really heavy, like it's been so humbling to really try to relax my mind into trying to understand trauma and like how it's played out in our culture. But there's a lot of tragic aspects to it. But one of the things it's like the degree to which you have suffered the trauma and the result of the trauma is the degree of the like feelings you don't want to feel that you have to move through in order to even get back to baseline. And it's like, there's that quote from the Bible, to those who have a lot, more will be given, and to those who have little, less will be given. It's almost like it's not fair, but it seems to be a function of the universe that the more you've been hurt, the more you have to move through.
Yeah.
And the less that you've been hurt, the less that you have to move through. And that there's this like gap of mud between where they're currently at and where they would need to get.
Yeah. It's a very good point to talk about, again, the guilt about if we actually accept. I think this is one thing that keeps people from recognizing how powerful we are, recognizing how magic we actually are. And we can trot out all of the Dispenza-esque placebo studies and all of the, which are clinically researched studies where there's hundreds and hundreds of these ways in which the mind has influenced dramatic healing on the body or dramatic harm on the body with the nocebo effect. We can trot this out and recognize how powerful we are. But if we really take it in and we really know it, then we go, shit, you mean I could have done this all along? You mean I could have lived this way in my 20s, in my 30s? And I can feel that too. Like, fuck, if I really step into this place of radical joy, like if I really do it, then I have to look back at all of the years that I spent in an amazing life, such an abundant, beautiful life, still suffering a bit. And I have to look back and be like, well, that's gone, But again, you just have to remove the judgment of that and just stay in the pocket of the present moment and know like, that's gone. Like that, the past is dead. It's a fiction. It's a figment of your imagination. And sure, it happened, but it's gone now.
Yeah.
It's gone. Like you have now. And like, can you go from now, wherever you are, can you really go from now without judging yourself in the past? And that's a difficult thing when you're lost in the shmokti of judgment, right? You're just clogged with it. And then you're like, I can't acknowledge this now because then I have to look back and you have to deal with the tragedy of it. It's like dealing with the tragedy of recognizing how much more I could have loved in my past relationships. I ended up in the perfect spot. I fucking love Vailana. She's amazing. And it's exactly where I wanted to be and should be. But do I not regret that I walked through my relationship with Whitney and all of my other beautiful paramours like Stephanie and Savannah and whoever else I was dancing with and loved? Lorena even? I mean, do I go back and not wish that I could have done it a little better?
Yeah.
Like a little better, like through this whole process?
Yeah.
Of course. But that's done now. And it's all like spending time on that is only a way to like take the whip and punish yourself.
Self-flagellate. An idea that I got exposed to that I've been munching on for a couple of weeks was, so if you look at how organisms evolve, something, and there's different theories about how this happens, but there will be a mutation that will enter into one of these organisms that will change their dynamic and power to all the other organisms. And that the first couple of generations of organisms that have this mutation, like a new claw or a new wing or it can run a little bit faster, most of them will use it so poorly that they don't reproduce. And almost the way the intelligence of the entire organism learns is through the ones using it badly and dying. And that humans got to a point in their development, and depending on what you believe, it's either aliens or interdimensional beings, or it's the fact that we had to throw rocks at shit, so we had to work together and we had fire. But we got to the point where we developed the ability to understand that there's a past and that there's a future, and that we could actually time travel in our minds. And in evolutionary time, it's been seconds since that's come on board. And we suck at it.
Yeah.
And there's this
it's like we can't not do it. It's like we have this ability and we're like, yeah, we got to do it. We got to do it.
Right.
Oh, we want to go past? You want to go to the future?
Right.
Like, yeah, let's fucking go.
Like we are new in using this superpower, and that there's been this movement in some spiritual veins, and I'm not going to get into, there's been movements in spiritual veins that essentially say, look at the child, look at the animal, and do you see how much peace they have? We should work to be like that. We should actually deny this mutation that we've been given and seek to be like that. And that almost feels like that's a denial of the arrow of the intelligence of the thing that we call evolution, but it's so much bigger than what that word is. And that it seems to be what our time is actively struggling with is, how can you learn the ability to be the child or the animal when you need to, but that then to come back into the game that you're being invited to use and use this superpower? Because the thing about being able to remember the past is that you learn shit.
Yeah, totally.
And then the thing about being able to go into the future is you have the ability to take what you've learned in the past and intelligently imagine a new way to do something that's never been done before. And like, the idea was presented in such a way where we are the first aperture of Gaia that has the ability to actually consciously become stewards with whatever the force of Gaia is, as opposed to just being another one of the flailing phalanges. And we are flailing with this fucking superpower. And that, like, a huge thing of what we're talking about on this podcast is like the ways we use this in like a clunky, dumpy way. And that the invitation is not to not use it, but to learn how to fucking wield Excalibur. You know, it's not King Arthur throwing it back into the fucking lake.
Yep.
You know?
And it's using it consciously and intentionally.
And compassionately too.
And yeah, exactly.
For ourselves.
Yeah, like to really, instead of just finding yourself chewing on the past with your own guilt and remorse,
Right.
or projecting to the future with your own anxious trepidation at what might become, you know, like know when you're doing it. All right, we're going into the future. Let's go. Let's set our intent and build this future reality, and then watch myself walk towards it, emotionally anchor myself to this reality that I'm looking for, and go there. Acknowledge the fears as well, because the more we lock them in the closet, the stronger they get.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to go away. And that's another big problem with this kind of new age, the secret thinking. Like, I don't want to think about the scary things. You better fucking think about the scary shit, because otherwise it's going to stay scary. And you have to look it straight in the eye until you look through it.
Right.
And then you, that's how you dispel it. But also emotionally anchor yourself to that reality. Go back in your past, learn whatever you can, but without judgment, knowing that you were doing your best. You know, like the best, and I talk about this on the Don Miguel podcast I just released, but the best can only be determined in the present moment. You can't decide that you did or did not do your best looking backwards in the rearview mirror. That's insane. Of course you could have done better now with what you know now and the way your mind is shaped now. If not, you're doing something terribly, terribly wrong.
The best can only be determined in the present moment.
Yeah,
I love that.
Exactly. So like, you did your fucking best, you know, like, of course you did.
By evidence that it was what you did.
But exactly.
And the thing that I think is really interesting to point out there is that people will use that as a way to justify continuing making the wrong choice in the present. And I do air quotes on the wrong. There are people who will bypass the responsibility of learning so that they can make a more compassionate, more aligned with the truth of what is hard choice in the moment by saying, well, like, there's some part of them that knows, I'm going to go do this thing that I know is not the thing to do, because I'll tell myself that it was the best that I could do. And on you know, it's like what we talked about earlier, that from the third dimension, it's a table. From the second, that it is true that whatever you chose to do was the best that you could do. But if you actually felt into your body in the moment right now, you can feel that there's a moment of choice between, am I choosing to do the hard right thing? Or am I choosing to do the easy out of alignment thing?
Yep.
And that's where the best can be, you know? And like, you know, when you don't choose the thing.
Yeah. And then paradoxically, it was the best that you could do because you didn't choose it. But nonetheless, you have a new chance and a new opportunity now to choose a new best, to choose the best now. And maybe that means you need more training. Maybe that means you need more discipline. Maybe that means,
I need to suffer more.
You need to work on your, warrior ethos. This is a big part of what Go For Your Win, that first course was about getting people to the position where they could train the skills and hone themselves to actually make that better of the choices in the moment.
Dude, and it's crazy to think like that course is what brought me here. Like,
I know, not just
that
you,
course
but
taught me and brought me.
like multiple people who were on the team. Yeah. That was a beautiful thing that came to be. And I'm excited. I was actually going through it this morning. So that's going to have a strong relaunch here coming up.
Do you want to tell me about the end of the first night?
We're
going to do 2 parts,
Yeah. So the end of the first night was, ultimately it was just layer upon layer of more bliss, the most bliss I've ever felt in an ayahuasca ceremony. And what was interesting, and eventually, it got to playing the piano, and the piano that was played was like, I've never heard the piano played like this in my life. Like, never heard it played by any classical composer, by anyone. And it was all just like flowing under like tea light candles in the twilight of the ceremony. I was like going, you've got to be fucking kidding me. And then the healings, because there was fewer people, both shamans were there, and there was some somatic aspect to it. Like, one had their hands, the maestra had her hands on my feet and was like holding my hand and singing her Icaros and like doing her thing. And then the maestro had his like hands on my head and like on some of the places where I had scars, and was doing this like super potent energy work. And it was so beautiful and strong that I was like fighting back from laughing, like when you're like in church and you're not supposed to laugh, I don't really go to church, but like that feeling of like, I'm not supposed to laugh right now, but this is so ridiculous that like, and so I was like, keep it together, bro.
Dude,
just
I know exactly that
stay here
feeling
for this
in
fucking
ayahuasca.
healing, like stay here for the healing. This is so crazy good. So that was a lot of it. And of course there's the work, and, I purged and I shit a bunch and I, did the whole thing. But, the biggest part was a lot of the topics we explored, just about judgment and doing it right, and where the magic lies, how the magic lies in the present moment and in these, so yeah, that was the navigation, and also just getting used to this new format and this new structure. Anyways, go to bed at, and again, their dieta is different, like the shaman was like, what I love after ayahuasca the most? Cheesecake.
What?
And I was like, cheesecake?
Oh my God.
And he's like, yeah, you should try it after ayahuasca sometime. And I was like, fuck,
you need to
man.
give me his contact information.
Yeah. So like ultimately they just have a different, it's like it's Brazilian, it's like it's like warm blooded, and it's like more free in a way.
Right.
And so we had some, fruit and some, light food afterwards, and eventually go to bed at like 5:30. I sleep 3 hours, which is tough. And then
that's
the
tough
work,
thing about I.
The work comes in of like, all right, I'm fucking exhausted this next day. I have a little bit of gas that I can ride from the ceremony because I'm still a little bit of the medicine. Finally,
any dreams that night?
No dreams that night. I tend to not have dreams on ayahuasca. Interesting. It's like all the visions come out. Anyways, get a good nap in the next day. Finally, like it takes me a while to even nap, but get a good nap in, and then we get ready for night 2. Night 2, we go in and I just looked at my notes. There's one part that I do want to share from night 1, and before we get into the start of night 2. The one other thing that was really powerful, and we've referenced the earth a few times. All of us have this intellectual idea of the earth as a being. the Great Mother, Pachamama. You know, it's like, it's who we are. It's what we're made of. And I'll say it in poetry, you know, we're wolf fur and pine resin and hummingbird feathers recycled and reformed, coalescing up and down, and, you know, articulation according to the double helix of our design. And I'll talk about how we're all connected to the earth and we are the earth and blah, blah, blah. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful poetry, right?
How dare you to yourself say blah, blah, blah at the end of that?
The reason why I say it is because I was on the medicine and I really felt the earth as a being, as a goddess. And I was like, oh man. Like, there she is, for real. There she is. Like, I feel her. I really feel her. And it's not intellectualized, and it's not condensed into a word. It's like I could feel her. And we also project our judgment onto the earth. Oh, you know, the earth, we're just viruses on her and she's going to, blah, blah. If we are the earth is us. She loves us. She loves us. She doesn't want to destroy us. She loves us. She created us. And we have the opportunity to love her too. But like that love at a being of that level, that love is also unconditional. Like, she loves us. She loves us so much that she's willing to allow us to defile her in a way. It's like in that level of surrender.
Yeah.
And like that was just this amazing moment, that just to really connect with these things that, you know, it's the difference between talking about God and then doing 5-MeO, and you watch the, you know, you see the vapor drain into your lungs, and then all of a sudden, all the times you've used God don't make sense at all.
No.
And you're like, God, oh, wow. You know, and it was like earth. Oh, wow. You know, and that was such a fucking potent moment. And I wish it was longer in a way, you know, and I wish I could keep it.
Yeah.
But I remember it. And I think that's the beautiful thing, is just to have that felt sense of the Great Mother, you know, and to really feel her and to really feel her love. And
yeah, the thing that
beautiful.
Brings up in me is, before I did psychedelics, I couldn't realize what I realized. And that once I did psychedelics, you have the opportunity to experience like the essence or the archetype of something that you've cut up into a little thing that you use as a word. And when you really feel that thing, the only response is no words. And it's only until you come a little bit enough into the illusion that you can even begin to have the audacity to try to tell the story. And it's one of the things that I constantly struggle with trip reports, is that there's a quote by Michael Pollan, and it's that to try to put the psychedelic experience into sentences and words and letters is to do it a type of violence, but to not do it is to literally leave it unthinkable. And that there's like, I loved what you said at the Fit for Service Summit in Costa Rica, where you said, I don't want to butcher it, but it's that words are not the tool of the poet. They actually get in the way.
They're the obstacle.
They're the fucking obstacle. And that the poet is the type of word user that's the closest to the numinous.
Yeah.
Of the ones who have the audacity to speak it, they're the closest to the numinous. And that I love that reframe, because most people are so stuck in the matrix that they look to the poets as like, they really know how to use the words. And that the people who are the poets, they can actually feel like every word I put down is like a violence against the thing that I love.
Yeah.
But to not do it would literally drive me fucking insane.
Yeah.
And it's this tension of like, I know I haven't felt that yet. I know I haven't met the mother. And I know that the language that I use about her is my audacity at not having that thing. And that I have the intuition, I will experience that at some point, and then I will then be again the insane poet that's like, I will go insane if I don't try to share this, but I know if I try to share it, I'm going to kill it.
Yeah.
And like one of the things I experienced with ayahuasca when I came back the second time was the moment she like started moving through my body on the first night, I was like, oh my God. My memory through story of the first time completely obliterated her from my mind. And that my only reference point going into the second session of ayahuasca was the illusion of the story that I wrote. And there was just this feeling of like, it's like the fucking fate of my artistic life is going to be, sand is going to be put into my hand and it's going to go through my hands. And then I'm going to think my hands were the thing. And it's just like, and so it is to be a poet though.
And then, but there is this, I think there is the way that it can be expressed in a different way is you think of Matthew McConaughey's scene in Interstellar where he lost that 50 years, right? And I talked to him about that on the podcast and how he didn't speak to anybody. He put himself 100% in there and he had that classic line, you know, anything after the first take is acting. And that take, he wasn't acting. That take, he was that pilot. And he had just lost 40 years of life for his daughter and had to watch her grow old on a screen. He didn't say anything. But watching him go through that is one of the most powerful moments I've ever seen in film. And it's because of the truth. It was even through the lens of a camera. I can only fucking imagine for the people who were there in person, right? But even through the lens of a camera, they felt something. And I think that's what it is with all the great spiritual teachers.
That's a great point.
Don Miguel and Ram Dass and Maharaji and all of these great spiritual teachers. I mean, I remember even Corey Allen talking about a transmission from Ravi Shankar, you know, great musician, but it wasn't the chords. It was the essence that was played through the instrument, whether it's sound or whether it's words or whether it's whatever. But there is a purity of being in resonance with that can be transmitted if you really get to the truth of it. And you know, I think that's the place. Like when a poet really expresses heartache and like really express, like you can almost feel it's hard when the words are just on a page because it's hard to carry that, but sometimes it can. But when it's performed and when you're there and you're transmitting it, and I know in my best talks and my best podcasts and hell, maybe even when I was talking about the earth just now, people felt a little something of like, I just got a little glimpse of something beyond the words because I don't even know what I said. I think I just repeated earth a bunch of times. I don't know. It wasn't particularly, I don't recall it being particularly poetic and, you know,
it
but
sucked.
Yeah. Well played. But ultimately, maybe there was something that was felt, and maybe when you're fresh off one of these journeys, I think that's why when I talked about ayahuasca fresh off, like I described it all right, I'm sure, but they could feel something. And I think that's the place we have to get to. It's the speaking from gnosis and using the clumsy instruments, whatever we have, whether it's a song or whether it's, you know, words or whether it's a podcast, whatever it is, whatever the medium is, just carry the truth, like get in resonance with what that truth is, and then let the other things take care of themselves. And I think it's still an approximation, but it's the best. It is the best we can do. And at that point, you know, it still carries truth. But if it's the words dry, if the words are dry, you know, if they're not wet with the frequency, they're not just dripping in the vibrational accord with that thing, you know, they're no longer there. Like if it
becomes cliche.
Yeah. And it becomes like this very strange thing, like a song that a rock star performed 1,000 times.
Right.
You know, like at first they fucking felt it. And maybe when they first went out on tour, they could fucking feel it, you know, and now it's like, okay, got to play the hits again. We're going to put them at the end because, you know, that's what the audience wants. But, you know, it's the hits, you know, even talking to like Satsang about I Am, you know, you still feel it, but like, it's not the same as when he first wrote I Am, but he's got to play I Am in all his songs. It's his big hit. You know, it's not that he doesn't love the song, but it may not carry the same thing that it once did. And sure, sometimes I'm sure it does. And I don't want to speak for him about that particular song, but just using him as an example of the fresh stuff is still alive. You know, he just wrote a love song about Montana. Probably in 10 years from now, maybe that love song won't carry the same feelings about Montana that it carries right now, because he's just been repeated a bunch. But I think that's the reason why art needs to be refreshed.
Absolutely. And it also feels like the thing that you're articulating here is the reason why almost all wisdom traditions, they talk about who taught them and who taught them and who taught them in person. And they talk about like, it must be a transmission of energy from one nervous system to the other. And that they almost, like, their lineage is how like the fucking Bible and Deuteronomy or whatever talked about all the sons of, you know, whoever else. But that the wisdom there is, it's like with Don Howard, man. He barely spoke to me. And I don't know if anyone has had a bigger impact on what my nervous system knows is like divine masculine grace.
Yeah.
He barely spoke and he made me weep.
Yeah.
And it was just indescribable presence, unlike anything I've ever known. So
yeah,
I get what you're saying, and I feel what you're vibing. You know, 'cause I was like,
thank you, brother. All right, night 2.
Part 2.
Night 2. So 5 minutes in, I drink the first cup. This experience, I've never experienced anything like this. And at this point, I'm like, well, I mean, we'll see what comes up here night 2, but drink the cup, no music yet. 5 minutes in, sitting there, sitting upright. This being comes into my field, like through a portal, into a field. And I'll take one of those too. And appears in the upper left quadrant of my vision. Now, when I say upper left quadrant, that means that no matter which way I turn my head, you know, it's still in the exact same orientation. I could do 360s. It's still going to be there. It doesn't matter which way I turn my face. It's like in this fixed spot. And this being looks like a Mayan deity, like you would see in like the old, like stone and, you know, painted masks and things. And he has this like mask on that's kind of covering half of his face and like going over almost like a hood, like hooded, but with the Mayan, you know, writing and masks and like animal skins and animal, you know, and he's sitting on this throne in absolutely stoic peace. And I'm like, wow. I mean, 5 minutes in, ayahuasca hasn't even hit yet. I'm like, this is unique. And he's just fucking chilling there. I'm like, all right. So I start to like ask it some questions. No response. No response. Stoic. Sitting in his throne. It's like, okay. And then I asked myself, I was like, all right, is this being an ally or is it something I should be concerned about? Not that I've dealt with a lot of gnarly shit like the World Crusher, not necessarily concerned, but is it something that has an energy that is not an ally, right? And strong message, strong, clear, strident, salient message, ally. No doubt says that. Okay, ally. Cool. 45 minutes goes by, still chilling there. No ayahuasca experience. It felt like it was going to come on for a second, and it felt like the gravity of this being was so dense and so heavy that it just sucked it right to it. And that got me a little concerned. I was like, well, shit, is he going to like suck this energy over here? And I just watched I watched some show on Gaia that was talking about fucking Anunnaki and sucking the unused spiritual potential energy of the human beings and wanting us to stay in suffering and conflict so that it could have more
great Dieta documentary.
Excess. Yeah, right. It's in between ceremonies. I was watching. I was like,
Terrible
I'll watch
idea.
Gaia, and then I end up in this. And all these stories are there, which was also a very important lesson because these stories were fueling different points of fear. I was like, it looks Mayan, but maybe that's what the Anunnaki look like. Maybe he's sucking my spiritual energy. And I was like, no, man, I don't even fucking believe in the Anunnaki. Like, what am I doing? It's not, I don't even, this is just a story I heard today. And I remembered also that Hamilton Souther, who's been on the podcast and I learned so much from, when he would talk about, Anunnaki being an alien race and there's all these alien races, he would talk about the aliens. He'd be like, I'd ask him because he would have all these encounters. He'd be like, yeah, aliens, they like to tell stories. And that's all he would say. He was like, well, what about them? He's like, yeah, they like to tell stories. Just be mindful, like look out for the stories. And I was thinking like, okay, I think this is just a story. I'm not feeling this. But nonetheless, my ayahuasca experience has been absorbed, feeling like it was absorbed by this being. So I'm deciding night one, so much bliss. I want to get back to that. I don't want this being to absorb it. So I'm like, all right, I know how to get rid of a being. You just love it. So I was like pouring love into this being. Stoic. Does not budge. I kiss it. I hug it. I say I love it. I try to become it. I say you are me. I am you. Tatwa masi. Mayan being. Stoic. Not budging. Not moving. Nothing. So then, an hour and a half in, I call the shaman over and in between songs. And I'm like, so I'd like another cup of ayahuasca, please. And I have this being and doesn't seem malicious, but he's heavy. And he's here in my vision. He just looks at me and he gives me the cup. He says, don't worry, you are not alone. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? Does it mean you see it too? And then I start worrying, like, did I draw this being through a portal and now it's affecting everybody's journey? Like, how's everybody doing? Did I ruin this for everybody? Like, fuck. So I have all these thoughts going. And then we get to one of the dancing portions and I get up and dance and I'm, eyes closed and I'm ecstatic dancing to the music. But I'm not ecstatic dancing, not like the last time because the ayahuasca's not hitting. So I'm just dancing. Like a sober Aubrey dances, which, I know how to let loose. I know how to ecstatic dance myself and I'm moving. I'm like, maybe it wants to dance. And I actually get it up off the throne for a second to dance, but it was almost like this sheer willpower of mine to get it to dance. It had just enough energy to get it up. And then immediately it would just sit back down like the gravity. It was just pulled by gravity back to its chair. And like I couldn't get it to dance. It's just sitting there. I'm like, fuck. Okay, 2.5 hours in, 3 hours in. I'm like, well, maybe a third cup of ayahuasca. And at this point, I'm like, I'm getting a little concerned at this point too, like waves of concern. Like, is this going to be like a part of my whole journey? Is my whole journey going to be just hanging out with this being who does nothing and says nothing and just stays there? And then is it going to be there forever, even beyond the journey? Like, is this like now a part of my life? Am I just going to be hanging with this being in the corner, upper left quadrant of my vision for the rest of my life? Like, I don't know if I want that, but I asked probably 10 times, are you an ally? And to myself, and it was always ally. Fuck, okay. And then eventually I had to surrender to the fact like, well, I guess, and this is the deep, deep lesson of ayahuasca, like that which you resist persists, right? And some part of me was resisting in a variety of ways, even though the being wasn't expressing in any way that was just, he was just being there. He was just literally being there. And I was like, all right, well, if you are now part of my whole journey and this is my whole journey, that's okay. And if you are a part of my whole life, like, that's okay too. And I was like, but if that's the case, let me look more deeply. Let me look more closely and really like understand and try to look in. And I was able to like, with that curiosity and with that acceptance, like peer in. And I saw him transform from this kind of anthropomorphized Mayan deity form into pure magic. And I just saw these raven's beaks and these violet light that was just pouring around it, mixed with this like cerulean blue and this green, and just flooded with magic, just magic, like the ultimate sorcerer, as a pure energy being, as like a magician, as this pure energetic magical being. And I was like, whoa, that is some fucking deep magic, like deep, deep magic. And the being is so still, like so still in the midst of this magic. And with that, I saw it and I accepted it. And I got the idea, like, this being, I think, is teaching me surrender, like in a really deep, deep way, about how to have all of this energy, all of that ecstatic energy that I'm talking about, that you have to purge and you move and you want to exhale and breathe out and kind of move out through dance or move out through whatever you're doing, or a wiggle or a turning over or a sigh or a something, or a stretch or a yawn. Nuh-uh. This being has all the magic and it's just there, just still, surrendered. And I was like, okay, you're a teacher of surrender. And then when I got that download, the being goes straight out the portal that it came from. And it's just like, whew, and I felt it fade away. And then as soon as it faded away, the 3 cups of ayahuasca fucking hit me like a freight train. Like, it was just like, wham. And it was like at full blast. Like, I can hardly recall being that blasted. I mean, I've gotten there before, but like peak blasted on ayahuasca. Visions, whereas there's no visions, no feeling. Everything just floods through. And at that point, I recognized the teaching of the being was like, can I just surrender, be like this being and sit with it? Like, just sit in it and hold it. So I would try and I would practice and I would just lay there. And I mean, the energy was just coursing through, like more voltage than I've, can hardly ever imagine, just pouring through my body, and the visions just exploding through my consciousness and consuming me entirely. And instead of moving, I would just hold, and as I would hold still and not purge any of it through excessive breath, just steady, deep breaths, deep breaths, deep breaths. The magic would get more and more intense and more like magical, honestly. And the longer I would stay, the magic would get deeper and things would start to rewire in my eye sockets, and I would feel the magic working in my brain, and it would start working through my whole body. But eventually the intensity would get so much that I would literally tap out. I would I can't fucking take it. So I would get up and breathe and like dry heave a little bit and like, fuck. And then I would go back into it and I would just sit there and like see how long I could take it. And it really felt like I was being like a sexual submissive to ayahuasca or to God. And like, how much can I really be a submit and surrender to this feeling? It's almost like one aspect of BDSM is like tickle BDSM, where like somebody's tied up and getting tickled. So the sensation is pleasurable, but nonetheless, like, when you're getting tickled, like the instinct is to move away. But imagine that your whole body was being tickled, but you don't move. You don't move to try and wiggle away, or you don't move to try and laugh it out. You just hold the tickle as much as you can. Like, can you hold it even though it's pleasurable? Like, can you hold it? Like, can you like not react to that pleasure? Or for us, I think actually, I don't know in person for both sexes, but after an orgasm, after a climax, the clitoris or the penis gets really sensitive. So if like someone continues to perform oral sex after the moment of orgasm, it's mad sensitive. And it's not like it doesn't feel good, but it's like, whoa, it's a lot. You know what I mean? So you scoot away or whatever. And your partner will like scoot away and you're like, oh, sorry. Like, like that time, that stroke is the time for that stroke is over. You got to give it a little break. But it was like, I was held in this place where just this ecstasy energy was so strong, and I could just see how long I could take it for. And the really deep lesson for me in that was that my tolerance to hold energy that's uncomfortable, particularly, or even just mildly neutral, is very low. I'm constantly modulating my consciousness. Modulate with a little tobacco, modulate with a little caffeine, modulate with a little food, modulate with a little this practice or this thing. I'm just constantly like surfing. And all of those things are fine, but they also leave me kind of wrestling myself. I'm always just kind of like wrestling myself a little bit. And I just understood that there's so much that's on the other side of just absolute surrender to what is and what you're feeling. And if you want to do something, great, but don't do it because you're compelled, because it's a compulsion and a need to modulate your consciousness. Like be stoic enough that you can hold whatever it is, whether it's pain or whether it's pleasure or whether it's whatever. Can you like just be with it and hold it? And that was like the massive, massive teaching of that night.
It feels like it's the ultimate initiation of the philosophy that you espouse, which is everything is allowed, or at least in the eyes of Source, all is God. And do you withhold joy because you know you're going to die?
Yep.
And that there's this deep, like, can you hold the joy in you and not do things to make it less?
Yep.
And there's something about the, like, it's like a reflection of the amount of work that you've done that the ally provided no hints.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
No guidance. You know, like in my ayahuasca experiences, because it feels like I'm just starting, it feels like very clear, like this is the task or the challenge that you have to do. And it feels like one of the things that was coming through at the beginning is that feels like a imagistic representation of your like highest king energy, which is like if you were truly in that, you wouldn't speak, because it's like, it's all. And I'm holding it.
Yep.
And that the like ego Aubrey is like the opposite.
Yeah.
You know? And that one of the things that's interesting to feel into for all of us who are into like self-improvement practices, which is, are you compelled to self-improve? You know, as opposed to, are you adding spice to the dish of your experience to enhance fully what you're trying to experience? And that to meditate can both be an addiction or it can be a seasoning.
Yep.
To ice bath or to sauna or to eat the right thing. And it's something that I feel our friend group struggles with, you know?
Yep.
And I think most people who have reaped the rewards of the positive aspects that come from doing all these practices, it's like, I'm compelled.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm sick or when I'm hurt, all my shit comes up.
Yeah.
There's a great quote by Nietzsche, and it's when a man is tired, he has to face dragons he thought he long since slayed. And it's like, people think that I've gotten so far on the path, but it's because I found all these ways to actually avoid the boy who's like, I'm not worthy unless I'm useful. Like, that's one of my core things.
I resonate with that deeply.
And one of the things that will fuck me up if I am sick or injured, because then I can't go perform my coping patterns that the rest of the world sees. Oh, wow, he's doing such a good job. He's so healed. He's so liberated from his suffering.
Yeah.
It's like, on the first night of our trip, I jumped off the fucking top of the yacht with you, and I landed in a way where I gave myself a little concussion.
Did you see the photo that showed your head?
I don't want to talk about it, Aubrey. But yeah, I did. And like that night, I was just spouting negativity to who was in bed with me, just spouting negativity. And then I went out to the deck and I just wept alone while all my friends were sleeping on this awesome yacht on this fucking awesome trip. And that I could feel that I was just a little bit hurt in the best fucking environment that I could possibly be in. And I was 7 and I was alone and no one loved me. And it's so humbling to, when I get hurt, like, you don't solve any of your wounds. You just can get good enough where their noise is small. But man, fall over.
Yeah.
And then they just explode forward.
Yeah. It's again something that Hamilton said, energy levels matter. And he just said it as concisely as that. But like, it's exactly that Nietzsche quote. Like, yeah, when you have the inner fire of who you are, all of these things are easy to deal with, but you get knocked off a little bit. It's one of also the challenging parts of ayahuasca, why they say it works continually throughout the time is because you're exhausting yourself. You're putting out a lot of energy. It's a lot of energy to hold that amount of energy, and it's very little sleep. And that in and of itself creates things that you have to deal with, things that are unearthed that you thought you put to bed a long time ago. But yeah, no doubt about it. Like this is, it was probably the most important, one of the most important lessons. And I realized like, cause I have this feeling like I'm just always wrestling myself. And then I was like, oh, you want to solve wrestling with yourself? It's not that you fucking find the winning move. Like you do the foot sweep and the shoulder, the hip toss, and you get yourself on its back and you win and you triumphantly have finished wrestling yourself. You just stop wrestling.
Yeah. Just
stop wrestling.
So you're going to go do a 10-day Vipassana retreat.
Or dark Vipassana. I am super called back to that because that to me is, I like things in the most extreme way, but that to me was the thing. That's why it's such a powerful medicine is you literally can't do anything in the darkness. You could wiggle, and think, but there's nothing. There's no sights that can distract you. There's no sounds that can distract you. Vipassana is great for that. And I think that would be also a great medicine. And, I'm down, but I'm also down to go back to the darkness in a really deep way. Because that to me was the best practice of this that I've ever experienced, because you're in your dark room. You're in the dark room for as long as you can bear it, and that's, there's a deep calling back to that. And I've felt since, so I'm integrating from the Aya and I'm still a little tired and I've lost out on some work stuff is a little behind. So I'm then going back into that and then I'm back into modulating and yesterday I was feeling kind of like really off my energetic game, so to speak. And Vi was like, well, do you think this has something to do with, the lesson that you got in Aya? And
damn it, don't see me.
Yeah.
Love of my life.
I was like, yes, exactly. It's like, I am not following the lesson that I learned. And so not only am I not following it, it's exaggerative, the consequences of that,
right,
that I'm feeling. And probably there's also some judgment that I have for I just learned this fucking lesson. I was graced with this Mayan deity of surrender for 3 hours to teach me this lesson. And here I am back to the kratom, caffeine, nicotine, work, plunge, pickleball fucking thing. And like, I gotta fucking sit with it. I gotta go back to that deep sitting with what is. And
it's the gravity of wisdom that when you know what it feels like to be in tune, the tension of being out of tune grows. It's like if you never ate right and then you had a period where you ate right, not eating right is actually more painful than what it was for the 20 years before. It's the same with working out. And there's a quote that the only antidote to consciousness is more consciousness. Like it's one of the, like, be careful what you wish for if what you're wishing for is more consciousness, because with more consciousness becomes a greater feeling of the tension of being out of tuned.
Yep. And
you have now a deeper layer of understanding of being out of tuned. Good luck.
And but what's great is that example from that being was such a good, it's almost like it's an ally now. So 100%. It's like I can just remember it and be like, okay, like you were with me. I remember, like. I see you. I see that. And you mentioned Don Howard earlier, and he exemplified this as well. I remember there was times where there would be, kind of this chaotic energy, this bubbling energy, and when everybody was just chatting amongst themselves and laughing, and we were trying to get into the serious work at the Mesa at the night, and Don Howard would just sit and he would just wait and just be still and allow it to unfold. And there was even an assistant that he had at the time, and the assistant was like trying to be powerful and kind of take some of the energy. And instead of Don Howard doing anything about it, just let him go, let him ultimately go and like fall on his face, basically. And it was just like this deep surrender energy of, you know, not being compelled to do anything, like being okay with what is. And eventually him being that anchor drew everybody back without him having to admonish anybody. But he just, I think actually at one point in one of the Wachuma ceremonies with him, like it was so much, I couldn't handle it, you know, like I couldn't handle it. So I was like, everybody fucking settle down, you know, like I couldn't hold it, you know, cause I could feel what Don Howard was holding, and Don Howard was holding it fine, but I couldn't do it. You know, I could feel the dissonance between those two different things.
That's Rainmaker shit.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, so yeah, man. And then, you know, the night ended up, I was really mostly so much about that journey that there wasn't like a lot of other content that we haven't covered or touched on or different things. And it was just beautiful to kind of bring this whole thing full circle and bring it to a close. And ultimately it was just a really, really gorgeous experience. And really, you know, it kind of makes me think that it's just, you have to be really mindful using these medicines. You know, they're strong and they're potent, and you have to give them, you know, enough space and enough, but they are always honing and always refining. And so many people ask, like, why do you need to do this? Like, you don't need to. You certainly don't need to. And I'm not recommending it, you know, but you can use them, you know, to really learn things that you could never learn in a different way. Like, yeah, I understand intellectually surrender. I understand intellectually about the earth. I get it in my mind, but that doesn't mean shit.
Yeah.
You know, that doesn't mean shit until you're there, like working with it.
Yeah. And like one of the things that comes up for me when people say like, why do you need it? Or why do you keep doing it? And it's like, if you take a moment to feel into the fact that our culture is sick, and if you can't see that, then that's a conversation that you would have to start at. But our culture is sick. We are born into trauma. We are born into systems that are corrupt, not completely, but have corruption and have trauma built into them. Most of us are fed poison. Most of us are not taught how to move or how to be outside. Most of us are given stories that are so shallow in like time, history, and wisdom. And we are given goals and games to play that make us sick, that make us compete, that make us jealous and violent and small. And most of us are getting reinforced with this sickness all the fucking time. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can work with the sickness. This is one of the most potent, period. Mm-hmm. And like, you go back in the same way, you know, like, do you shower once and then you're done? Like, shit's dirty. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. And it's not something, but it's objectively dirt. And you shower. And one of the most beautiful, powerful, sometimes too hot, sometimes too cold shower are psychedelics. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I feel into is that on average, a person who has courageously and responsibly and earnestly explored psychedelics even once, there's empathy that they have for the human condition. And there's a compassion and also a curiosity that I tend to not find in the average person who hasn't explored psychedelics. But it's not exclusive. There are some beautiful souls that I have met who have never touched psychedelics. And there are people who do psychedelics all the time, and they're assholes with inflated egos who in some ways are even more squirmy type wolf things because they've learned how to use like nonviolent communication violently, and they've learned how to use all these motherfucking like they sage the space before they have a conversation with you because they feel like it's like a passive aggressive way to say it.
Right before they shit all over you.
Right. And so like both types of people are in both, but our culture is sick.
Mm-hmm.
And when this is done earnestly, it's medicine.
Yeah, it's really like the necessity for detoxification is directly proportional to how toxic your environment is.
Right.
You know, the body will do that naturally. If you're in a toxic environment, the body will naturally detoxify to the same extent as best of its ability. And I think that's something that people don't realize. And also some of the old wisdom was really valuable to times when the culture wasn't as toxic.
Right.
When the time wasn't as toxic. Even going back to the 60s, it wasn't as toxic, you know, psychologically at the very least, and also environmentally from the, you know, preponderance of glyphosate and all the shit that's out there in the world that we're taking in physically, mentally, emotionally, all of the different things that we're having to absorb and consume in our world. It was different then, you know, so you can listen to a, you know, 6th century sage who lived out in the forest and says, you know, you don't need this, or, you know, someone from the, you know, 50s living out in a commune somewhere out in nature, farming their own food and being like, you don't need this. Yeah, right. Was true then for sure. But in a more toxic environment, you need more powerful detoxification agents. And I think that's the place that we're in. And it's speaking to exactly what you're saying is we're dipping right back into the same culture. And this is one of those powerful tools. Now, as you said, also, it's not the only way. You can remove yourself from the grid or do it in a different way in the dark room, or have a consistent breathwork practice that's cleaning a little bit every day.
Right.
But I think some combination of all of the above is really what speaks to me. And granted, I think I lean too heavily on psychedelics to do the cleaning. Limpia quebrosita, clean the little body, you know, like, great. It's like I'm going to like extreme cleans to extreme immersion in the fucking maelstrom of a largely toxic society, even though so many of my elements are so beautiful. I'm still in it.
Right.
You know, and I think there's a big space for me to really experience a lot more of the soft, slow, gentle. Let's do a long water fast. Let's do an immersion in the darkness.
100%.
Let's go out in nature. Let's just camp indefinitely.
Right.
Let's go on a walking trip from somewhere in the bush towards Uluru and stopping at little outposts and sleeping out in the outback. Like, for sure, that's a way. You can't cook a muffin at 1,000 degrees for 3 minutes and expect it to turn out exactly as good as a 325 for 15. You know, it's like, yeah, it's going to be cooked, but it's going to be a little charred in some spots. And I think that's also the risk. But if you can blend all of these things together, I think those are the countermeasures that are needed for the time that we're in. And I feel that more than ever now.
100%. It feels like it comes down to, can you feel your authenticity and can you express it? And if you can't feel it and you can't express it, there are tools to help you feel it and to express it. There are tools that are outside of psychedelics that can help you do both. And psychedelics are really fucking good if you know how to do them respectfully.
Totally. And, if there's a lot that you have to work on, like going to that extreme 1,000-degree temperature, if you're made of combustible trauma, do not go. Don't jump in the ayahuasca oven. It is a trial by fire and you will explode. Like if you're made of magnesium filaments, like don't fucking go. It's just going to be a white hot, incineration.
Yeah.
Like do other things. So be super mindful that this is not the cure all.
Right.
And so many people who are in really tough spots, they'll think like ayahuasca will cure me. No, if you're in a really tough spot, like probably not the time. Like go in ayahuasca strong.
Right.
Like go in strong and because it will challenge you and you'll need your strength and you'll need what you can. But there's so many different practices, so many different things. Start with float tanks, maybe escalate from float tanks to breath work and escalate from breath work to ecstatic dance and escalate from that to, maybe then you'll learn how to be able to meditate on your own and spend some time in nature. And then maybe the MDMA assisted psychotherapy would be a good first step. And then maybe some really intelligently guided psilocybin journey, like maybe even a intentionally cannabis yoga journey would be good. Like there's so many different ways. And ayahuasca is certainly not the only way. Iboga is certainly not the only way, though in certain dire conditions like heroin addiction, like Iboga has shown incredible promise. But ayahuasca in particular is the one of the shamans we were with in Miami, I think she described it as, or maybe it was this recent shaman, I don't know. But the way ayahuasca heals is it, instead of pushing you upwards to go up, it pushes you down to go up, like imagining all the dimensional realities as circle. Like ayahuasca is pushing you through the density, down through the density. And so you have to experience all the shit, all your fears, all of your anxieties, all your shames, all of the stuff. It's going to push you down before you go back on the loop back up. Whereas these other things, they can lift you from the place where you've been. Ketamine is another one that can lift you from the place that you're in pain and lift you to another reality, a neutral reality of the void. That's maybe the way, because you really have to be ready to go down to go up. And going down to go up, if you've never been down, there's fucking snakes and fangs and there's all kinds of things down there. So that's why really being ready to be that spiritual warrior that's willing to go down into, descend into the underworld to emerge back to heaven. It's just the way the medicine works. It's just, its way as a sacred teacher.
Yeah. I have a dream that one day there will be therapists or psychologists that have the eyes that are able to see, okay, where are you at? And that all the tools are legal and available. And that there's not a overcompensation to using the fucking bazooka.
Yeah.
But that it's all legal and that we can help people where they're at, because the culture is going to be transformed by the transformation of individual consciousness from, their story of separation, which is fueled mostly by unprocessed trauma. And of course, there's a little bit of other things, but if you just try to change the systems, but you don't change the little monkeys that create the systems, the traumatized monkeys are going to create traumatized systems again. Yeah. And I have a dream,
push pause right there, because that's so important to recognize. Like, you can imagine, if we could just snap our hands and the world would be, the oceans would be clean and the environment would be, pristine again and all of that. Okay, well, how long till we did the same shit again? Like, the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, as Charles Eisenstein says, it has far less to do with the world and far more to do with the people who are creating the challenges in the world.
With our hearts. It has to do with our hearts.
It has to do entirely with our hearts. Because if we do anything else, the corruption in our hearts, our own delusion, our own shmoktis, and our own ways in which we see the world, we're just going to recreate the same thing over and over again. So I think that's why, of course, feeling the earth, you want to help the earth
100%.
Directly. And I celebrate that. I celebrate all of the efforts to help the earth directly. But if we don't help the people who are in the positions of power who are doing this to the earth, then, and all of the people, the collective consciousness of all of this, who are supporting all of it and consuming the products that are supporting all, if we're not changing the people, then we're not going to get anywhere.
We will recreate a different version of the same energy systems. Totally. And there's that quote that has been coming up for me in the last week when I've been sharing it with people, and it's been misattributed to the Buddha, but it's, when I was a young man, I tried to change the world. When I realized I couldn't change the world, I tried to change my nation. When I couldn't change my nation, I tried to change my tribe. And when I couldn't change my tribe, I tried to change my family. And now as an old man, I realized that all I can do is change myself. And once I changed myself, I began to change my family. And once I began to change my family, and then all the way down. Mm-hmm. And that's the place to start.
Yep. Aho. We did it, brother.
We fucking did it. How long was that?
I don't know. 2:05. Shit. Light work today, brother. Light
Part
work. Easy day. I love you.
I fucking love you.
Thanks for sharing this amazing journey with us. This is
brother. Thank you.
Yeah, man. And thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Christian.
Thank you.
I love you guys. We'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.